The file arrived at 3:17 a.m. It wasn't an email, not in the traditional sense. It simply materialized in a sandboxed partition on my server, a ghost in the machine wrapped in a layer of encryption so dense it seemed to absorb the light from my monitor. My apartment, a converted textile factory from the 1940s with exposed brick walls and groaning pipes, was shrouded in the kind of silence that only the dead of night in downtown LA can offer. Rain pattered against the drafty windows, an erratic rhythm against the low, steady thrum of my servers. I was a digital archivist, a glorified data librarian for corporations, with secrets too sensitive for the cloud. My job was to be invisible, a ghost myself, preserving and forgetting on command. This file, however, felt different. It had no sender, no metadata, only a single, cryptic label, Ariadne. My heart raced, a frantic staccato against my ribs. This wasn't a client drop. This was a breach. My fingers trembled as I ran a trace, my own custom scripts weaving through the dark web, searching for a digital footprint. Nothing. The file's origin was a perfect vacuum. Whoever sent this was a phantom. Against every protocol, against every instinct for self-preservation I had honed over a decade in the digital shadows, I began to probe the encryption. It was a masterpiece, elegant and lethal. Not a corporate or government signature. This was bespoke, artisanal code, the kind whispered about on hidden forums, the kind that could bring down markets or erase a person from existence. My phone rang, the shrill electronic shriek tearing through the silence. Blocked number. My blood ran cold. I never answered blocked numbers. It was rule number one in a life built on anonymity. But the file, Ariadne. I let it ring, the sound fraying my already frayed nerves. It stopped. A moment later, a text message bloomed on the screen. "Don't try to open it, little mouse. You'll only get caught in the trap." My breath hitched. They were watching, not just the file, but me. I scanned my apartment, my eyes darting into the shadows, searching for the glint of a lens, the telltale red dot of a laser. Nothing. The threat wasn't outside. It was inside my walls, inside my machine. A second text arrived. "You have something that belongs to me. I'm coming to collect it. Don't make this difficult." Panic, cold and sharp, coiled in my gut. I slammed my laptop shut, the click echoing in the cavernous space. I had to run. But where? My life was a fortress of firewalls and encrypted drives. I had no go bag, no fake passports. My only identity was the one they had already breached. The intercom buzzed, a harsh, guttural sound that made me jump. I crept to the panel, my hand clutching the cold comfort of the pepper spray on my keychain. The screen flickered to life, showing the building's dimly lit lobby. A man stood there, alone. He was tall, dressed in a black bespoke suit that probably cost more than my entire server rack. His dark hair was swept back from a face carved from granite, all sharp angles and unforgiving lines. He wasn't looking at the camera. He was looking directly up, as if he could see me through the concrete and steel. He raised a hand and pressed a single finger to his lips. A silent command. "Be quiet." He knew I was watching. Then, the screen went to static. The silence that followed was worse than the noise. It stretched, thin and taut, until the sound of the elevator ascending my private shaft began its slow, deliberate climb. He was coming up. My apartment had a single entrance, a reinforced steel door with a biometric lock. It was supposed to be impenetrable, but as the elevator chimed, signaling its arrival on my floor, the lock on my door clicked open with a soft, final sigh. The door swung inward, revealing him standing in the hallway, bathed in the cold, sterile light. He stepped inside, and the shadows seemed to rearrange themselves around him, paying deference to a greater darkness. "Clara Hayes," he said. His voice was a low baritone, a gravelly hum that vibrated through the floorboards. It wasn't a question. "You've been a difficult woman to find." He took in the apartment with a sweep of his emerald green eyes, his gaze lingering on the server racks, the tangle of cables, the chaotic order of my life's work. There was no weapon in his hand, but his presence was more menacing than any gun. He was the apex predator, and I was the little mouse caught in his trap. "What do you want?" I managed, my voice a shallow whisper. "I already told you," he said, his eyes finally settling on me, pinning me in place. The intensity of his gaze was a physical force, stripping away my layers of digital armor, leaving me exposed. "I'm here for what's mine." He took a step closer, and the subtle scent of expensive cologne, sandalwood, and amber drifted towards me. "The file, Ariadne." "It was a mistake," I said, clutching my pepper spray so tightly my knuckles were white. "A misdirected transfer. I'll delete it. You can watch." A ghost of a smile touched his lips, a cold, humorless expression that did not reach his eyes. "It's never a mistake with data like that, and you can't delete it, not without the key, which is why you're going to come with me." "I'm not going anywhere with you." He chuckled, a low, muffled sound that sent a chill down my spine. "You seem to be under the impression that you have a choice." He moved with a fluid grace that was unnerving, closing the distance between us in 2 long strides. He gently took the pepper spray from my unresisting fingers, his touch surprisingly warm against my cold skin. "This won't be necessary," he set it on the counter. "My name is Julian Thorne, and from now on, you work for me." That was how my world ended, and how a new, far more dangerous one began. Julian's black SUV, a silent, armored beast, sliced through the rain-slick streets of LA. I sat in the back, the supple leather cold against my skin, the silence stretching between us. He hadn't spoken a word since his declaration in my apartment. I was a package being delivered, a piece of hardware being transported. I should have been terrified. A part of me was. My heart hammered a frantic rhythm against my ribs, and my blood felt like ice in my veins. But another part of me, a part I didn't recognize, was consumed by a dangerous, irresistible curiosity. Who was this man who could bypass military-grade security with a whisper? What was in that file that was worth this level of theatrical intimidation? We pulled into the garage of a downtown skyscraper, a sleek monolith of black glass and steel that stabbed at the stormy sky. We rode a private elevator to the penthouse. The doors opened not into a home, but into a command center. A bank of monitors covered one wall displaying stock tickers, satellite images, and cascading lines of code. The furniture was minimalist, expensive, and black. The only color came from the city lights glittering below, a sprawling carpet of diamonds laid at his feet. "Describe the encryption," Julian commanded, moving to stand before the panoramic window, his back to me. "It's a nested quantum algorithm," I said, my voice finding a sliver of its professional confidence. "It's not just a lock, it's a living defense system. Every failed attempt to breach it makes it stronger. It rewrites itself." "I know what it is," he said, his tone sharp. "I designed the first iteration, but it's evolved. Someone has improved upon my work." He turned, his emerald eyes boring into me. "Someone I intend to find. Your job is to get me inside. Quietly. That's impossible without the decryption key. It would take a supercomputer years to brute force it, and by then the data would be corrupted beyond recovery." "I don't pay for impossible," he stated flatly. "I pay for results. You have 48 hours. You will have access to any resource you require. Fail, and the life of anonymity you cherish so much will be permanently erased. I will make you a ghost in a way you can't even imagine." The threat hung in the air, cold and absolute. For the next 2 days, I lived in a state of suspended reality. I worked in his sterile command center, fueled by black coffee and the low-grade hum of his quiet, menacing presence. He rarely spoke, but I always felt his eyes on me, watching, analyzing. I was a puzzle he was trying to solve. The fear was a constant companion, a cold knot in my stomach. But the intellectual challenge of the Ariadne file was a siren's call. It was the most beautiful, complex piece of code I had ever seen. It was a work of art. I worked, my fingers flying across a holographic keyboard, my mind lost in a labyrinth of data. Julian would watch me for hours, a silent, brooding statue. Occasionally he would murmur a suggestion, a line of inquiry I hadn't considered, and his insight was always brilliant, unsettlingly so. He understood the code on a level that felt intuitive, personal. "Who are you?" I asked late on the second night, my voice raw with exhaustion. The city lights below blurred into a hazy watercolor painting. "I'm a man who solves problems," he replied, his voice a low rumble in the darkness. "You're more than that. No ordinary consultant designs encryption like this. This is weaponized data. It's meant to cripple, to destroy." "Everything has a cost, Clara," he said, moving to stand behind my chair. I could feel the warmth of his body, smell that scent of sandalwood and amber. It was intoxicating and terrifying. To build an empire, sometimes you must first burn down the ones that stand in your way. His admission sent a chill down my spine. This wasn't corporate espionage. This was war, and I was standing on the front lines. On the final morning, with only hours to spare, I found it. A single line of recursive code, a flaw so small, so elegant. It could only have been left intentionally. It wasn't a backdoor. It was a signature, a message. "It's not a key," I whispered, my voice trembling with the thrill of discovery. "It's a question. The encryption isn't asking for a password. It's asking for a response to an unasked question." Julian was at my side in an instant, his eyes fixed on the screen. "My father," he breathed, his voice tight with an emotion I couldn't decipher. "He always said the best security wasn't a wall, but a conversation only two people could finish." He looked at me, and for the first time, I saw something beyond the cold control in his eyes. Vulnerability. "He's dead. He died 10 years ago. I thought his work died with him." "Someone found it," I said. "Someone is continuing his work. Or using it against me," Julian finished, his jaw tight. He looked from the code to my face. "What's the question?" "I don't know. It's philosophical. It's based on a shared memory, a piece of information that only you and the Creator would know." The hope that had flickered in his eyes died, replaced by a bleak finality. "Then it's impossible. His secrets are buried with him." The 48 hours were up. I had failed. I braced myself for the consequences, for the cold, final click of my life being deleted. But Julian just stood there staring at the screen, a man haunted by a ghost in his own machine. I don't know what possessed me. Pity? A foolish, reckless empathy? "When I was a kid," I began, my voice quiet, "my father and I had this game. He was a cryptographer for the government. He'd leave me coded messages, little puzzles. The key was never a word. It was always a memory. The day we flew a kite in the rain, the name of the stray dog we found. Things only we would know." Julian turned to me, his gaze intense. "Your father, what was his name?" "Daniel Hayes," I said. "He died 3 years ago. A sudden heart attack." Julian's expression was unreadable. He took a step back, a strange, dawning horror in his eyes. He crossed to a biometric safe-set flush against a black marble wall. It opened with a soft hiss. He removed a single worn, leather-bound journal. He handled it with a reverence that seemed out of character for a man like him. He opened it, his fingers tracing the faded ink on the pages. "Daniel Hayes," Julian read aloud, his voice strained. "My father's most brilliant protege, his chosen successor, the only man he ever trusted." He looked up at me, his face pale. "They worked together for 20 years. They were partners. They were friends." He closed the journal. "My father didn't have a heart attack, Julian. He was murdered. And Daniel Hayes was the one who was supposed to take his place, to protect his legacy. But he disappeared. We thought he ran. We thought he betrayed us." My world tilted on its axis. My father, the quiet, gentle man who taught me to see beauty in algorithms, a man connected to this dark, violent world. It was impossible. "No," I whispered. "You're lying." "Your father built the lock," Julian said, his voice soft, almost gentle. "And my father built the key. They designed it together. A failsafe. The Ariadne Protocol. A dead man's switch designed to release my father's life's work. All his secrets, all his sins, if something happened to both of them. It was meant to be a deterrent, a weapon of last resort." He looked at me, and his eyes were filled with a terrible dawning realization. "The file wasn't sent to you, Clara. It was activated by you. Your father's death must have been the final trigger. The file wasn't a threat. It was an inheritance, a legacy of secrets and lies, and I, the little mouse, was the only one who could open the trap. "The question," Julian said, his voice urgent, "what was your father's favorite place?" My mind raced, scrambling through years of memories. He, he didn't have one. He always said his favorite place wasn't a place at all. My voice broke as the memory surfaced, clear and painful. It was a moment, the moment right before a storm breaks. That quiet, electric stillness. Julian's fingers flew across the keyboard, typing the phrase. The quiet stillness before the storm. The screen went black. Then a single word bloomed in the center in stark white letters. Welcome. The file was open, and my life, as I knew it, was over. The secrets spilled out like digital blood. Encrypted ledgers detailing financial assassinations. Shell corporations designed to launder billions. Blueprints for technology that could destabilize nations. It was my father's life's work and Julian's father's. A dark, twisted legacy of power and control. Julian stood beside me, his shoulder brushing mine, as we watched 2 decades of hidden history unfold. He was silent, his face a mask of cold fury. This wasn't just a file, it was a map to his father's killer, and a testament to my father's betrayal, or so he thought. "He didn't betray him," I whispered, my eyes scanning a series of encrypted personal logs from my father. "He was trying to protect him. He discovered a faction within the organization, a group led by a man named Marcus Thorne, Julian's uncle." Julian's head snapped towards me, his eyes blazing. "My uncle died years ago, a boating accident." "It wasn't an accident," I said, pointing to a data-stamped entry. "My father found evidence that Marcus was planning a coup. He was going to kill your father and seize control. Your father wouldn't believe him. He thought his own brother was loyal." My voice trembled as I read the final entry. "He's gone. Julian is alone now. I have to hide the work. I have to protect the boy. Marcus will hunt me to the ends of the earth for this. But I have to try. My father didn't run. He hid. He hid himself. He hid the legacy, and he hid me. Right under their noses, for my entire life." The air in the room grew thick, heavy with the weight of 2 decades of lies. Julian stood motionless, the revelation washing over him, rearranging the entire history of his life. The man he had hunted for a decade as a traitor was the one man who had tried to save his family, and I was that man's daughter. "Everything I've built," Julian said, his voice a low, raw whisper, "has been based on a lie. My revenge, my consolidation of power. It was all pointed at the wrong ghost." He looked at me, and the anger was gone, replaced by a profound, soul-deep weariness. "Your father was a better man than mine. My father's pride got him killed." In that moment, he wasn't Julian Thorne, the ruthless architect of a corporate underworld. He was just a son, mourning a father he never truly knew. An instinct I couldn't explain, a reckless surge of empathy, made me reach out and place my hand on his arm. His muscles were coiled steel beneath the fine wool of his suit. He looked down at my hand, then up at my face. The silence stretched, filled with the unspoken grief of 2 children orphaned by the same war. "Marcus is still out there," I said, my voice finding a strength I didn't know I possessed. "He's the one who improved the encryption. He's been trying to get this file. He's the one who wants you dead. And now he knows you exist," Julian said, his hand covering mine, his touch sending a jolt of electricity through me. "He knows you're the key." His expression hardened, the grief receding, replaced by the cold, calculating strategist. "He will come for you." "Let him," I said, the words tasting like defiance on my tongue. "This is my father's legacy too. I'm not running." A slow, dangerous smile spread across Julian's face. It was the first genuine smile I had seen from him, and it was terrifying and beautiful all at once. "Good," he said, "because I wasn't going to let you." He leaned in closer, his voice dropping to an intimate whisper. "Trust me, Clara. Stay with me. We'll finish what your father started, together." It was an offer of protection wrapped in a declaration of war. It was a prison sentence and a partnership. I looked into his emerald eyes, a vortex of darkness and danger, and a flicker of something else. Something that looked like hope. And I, who had spent my entire life in the shadows, made a choice. I chose to step into the fire. "I trust you," I whispered, and I knew with a chilling certainty that my life would never be the same. The days that followed were a blur of calculated paranoia. I didn't leave the penthouse. Julian transformed it from a command center into a fortress. His people, silent, black-clad figures who moved with lethal efficiency, materialized, mapping out security protocols, installing countermeasures. I became a willing prisoner in a gilded cage. The city lights my only connection to a world I no longer belonged to. But it wasn't a prison. It was a war room. And I was no longer an archivist. I was a cryptographer, a ghost hunter, diving deep into the digital entrails of the Ariadne file, searching for the ghost of Marcus Thorne. Julian was my shadow, a constant, intense presence. We worked side by side, the silence between us filled with the quiet language of shared purpose. He showed me the hidden architecture of his empire, the intricate web of power and influence he commanded. I, in turn, showed him the soul of the machine my father had built, the elegant, secret passages within the code. In the crucible of our shared legacy, something shifted. The fear I felt for him began to morph into a reluctant admiration. The line between captor and protector blurred, then vanished entirely. One night, exhausted, I fell asleep at the console, my head pillowed on my arms. I woke to find a cashmere throw draped over my shoulders and Julian sitting in the chair opposite me, simply watching me in the dim glow of the monitors. The cold mask was gone. In its place was a raw, unguarded expression that made my breath catch. "You look like him," he said, his voice soft. "Your father. He had the same intensity when he was lost in a problem." "You knew him," I said. It wasn't a question. "I was a boy. He would come to the estate to work with my father. He taught me how to play chess. He was kind, patient." A shadow passed over his face. "When he disappeared, my father told me he was a traitor. I hated him for it. I've spent the last 10 years hating the only man who ever showed me any genuine kindness." He looked at me, his eyes filled with a decade of misplaced grief. "I'm sorry, Clara, for what my family did to yours, for the life you should have had. You couldn't have known," I whispered. "I should have," he countered, his voice harsh with self-recrimination. "I should have questioned it, but it was easier to believe the lie, to channel my grief into anger and build an empire on top of it." He stood and walked to the window, staring down at the city below. This was all for him, to avenge him. And it was all for nothing. I walked to stand beside him, the glass cool against my arm. "It's not for nothing," I said. "Now you know the truth. Now you can get justice, for your father and for mine." He turned to me, and the space between us crackled with an unspoken energy. He reached out, his fingers gently tracing the line of my jaw. "You are so much more than his daughter," he breathed. "You are brilliant and brave, and you look at me not as a monster or a title, but as a man." His thumb brushed across my lower lip. "And it is making it very difficult to remember that I am the one who is supposed to be protecting you." My heart hammered against my ribs. "Maybe I don't need protecting," I whispered, my voice trembling. "Maybe I need a partner." His eyes darkened, the emerald depths swirling with a dangerous fire. "Be careful what you wish for, Clara," he murmured, his voice a low growl. "Once I cross this line, there's no going back. I won't let you go." "Who said I wanted to?" The dam of his control broke. He pulled me to him, his mouth crashing down on mine. It wasn't a gentle kiss. It was a desperate, hungry claiming. A decade of loneliness and a lifetime of control poured into a single, searing contact. I clung to him, meeting his intensity with my own. A silent surrender and a fierce declaration all at once. This was reckless, insane. He was danger and darkness incarnate. But in his arms, for the first time in my life, I felt truly seen. And I knew, with a terrifying certainty, that I was already his. We found the first breadcrumb 2 days later. A ghost server, routed through a dozen countries, pinging a defunct satellite. It was Marcus. He was communicating with someone inside Julian's organization. He had a spy. The paranoia in the penthouse solidified into a cold, hard certainty. We were no longer just hunting a ghost. We were hunting a traitor in our midst. The list of suspects was terrifyingly small. It had to be someone in Julian's inner circle, one of the few people who knew the full extent of his operations. Every silent, black-clad guard became a potential enemy. Every trusted lieutenant, a possible Judas. Julian became even more withdrawn, the weight of the impending betrayal settling on him like a shroud. He pushed me away, not with cruelty, but with a calculated distance that hurt more than any harsh word. He was protecting me, putting up walls to shield me from the shrapnel when it all exploded. But I wouldn't let him. "You promised," I said, cornering him in his study, where he'd been staring at a wall of security feeds for hours. "You promised we would do this together." "This part is my burden to bear," he said, his voice flat, his eyes never leaving the screens. "I will find the traitor, and I will deal with him. You will be kept safe." "You think safety is what I want?" I demanded, my voice rising. "I want the man who looked at me like I was the only person in the world. The man who was willing to be vulnerable. Not this cold, distant machine." He finally turned to me, his face a mask of anguish. "That man is a luxury I can't afford right now," he thundered, his voice echoing in the silent room. "Don't you understand? It could be anyone. The man who brings you your coffee, the woman who guards your door, my most trusted advisor. To find him, I have to suspect everyone. And that includes seeing you as a potential liability, a weakness to be exploited. Is that the man you want?" Tears stung my eyes, but I refused to let them fall. "I want the man who trusts me," I said, my voice shaking but firm. "The way my father trusted yours, the way I'm trusting you. Or is this all just a one-way street, Julian? You demand my trust, but you offer none of your own?" His resolve crumbled. The anger drained from his face, leaving behind a raw, aching pain. He crossed the room and pulled me into his arms, burying his face in my hair. "You are not a liability," he murmured, his voice thick with emotion. "You are the only thing that is real in all of this, and the thought of him getting to you, it paralyzes me." "Then let me help you," I whispered into his chest. "Let me be your partner. I can see things you can't. I'm not blinded by years of history and loyalty. I just see the data." He pulled back, his hands framing my face, his eyes searching mine. And in that moment, he made a choice. He chose to trust. "All right," he said, his voice regaining its command, but with a new undercurrent of partnership. "Let's hunt." We worked together, a seamless fusion of his strategic genius and my analytical precision. He fed me personnel files, communication logs, financial records. I built a web, a complex matrix of data points, searching for the anomaly, the single thread that was out of place. And I found it. It wasn't in the financials or the phone logs. It was in the security protocols. Small, almost imperceptible deviations over the past 6 months. A camera loop here, a patrol route altered by a few feet there. They were meaningless on their own, but together they painted a picture. They created a series of blind spots, a hidden path through Julian's fortress. And all of them were authorized by one man, Nico, Julian's head of security, his father's most loyal soldier, the man who had been with him since he was a boy. The betrayal was a cold, physical blow. I watched Julian's face as he looked at the evidence. A flicker of disbelief followed by a chilling, absolute stillness. The pain was so profound it was almost visible. "Why?" he asked, the word a hollow echo in the room. He was like a father to me. "Because of this," I said, pulling up the final piece of the puzzle. "A series of encrypted transfers to an offshore account, an account linked to a private hospital in Switzerland. The patient records were sealed, but the diagnosis was clear, a rare degenerative genetic disorder. And look at the date of the first transfer, the day after your father's boating accident. The truth, when it came, was more devastating than we could have imagined. Marcus hadn't just orchestrated a coup. He had poisoned his own brother slowly, methodically, with a custom-engineered biological agent that mimicked a heart attack. A poison that was now killing Nico's only son. Marcus hadn't bought Nico's loyalty with money. He had bought it with the antidote. The final confrontation took place in a place of ghosts and memories, the old Thorne family estate, a sprawling, Gothic mansion north of the city, abandoned since his father's death. Marcus had requested the meeting. He knew we had found him out. He was ready for the endgame. "You stay here," Julian commanded, his hand on the hilt of the gun holstered beneath his suit jacket. "Like hell I will," I retorted, holding up a small, sleek data drive. "My father left me one final gift, a logic bomb, a kill switch for the Ariadne protocol. If Marcus gets that file, I can wipe it from existence. But I have to be there. This is my fight, too." The look in his eyes was a maelstrom of fear, pride, and a fierce, possessive love. "Do exactly as I say," he ordered, his voice leaving no room for argument. "No heroics. You are there as a failsafe, nothing more. Understood?" "Understood," I lied. The estate was a mausoleum, draped in white sheets and smelling of dust and decay. Marcus was waiting for us in the grand library, surrounded by the ghosts of his family's legacy. He looked like an older, more dissipated version of Julian, with the same emerald eyes, but his were clouded with greed and resentment. Nico stood beside him, his face a mask of tragic, tormented loyalty. "Nephew," Marcus began, a predatory smile on his lips. "And the little archivist, the ghost of Daniel Hayes. How wonderfully poetic." "It's over, Marcus," Julian said, his voice dangerously calm. "You've lost." "Have I?" Marcus countered. "I have the loyalty of your most trusted man. I have the cure for his dying son. And you have a girl. You traded an empire for a liability. My brother would be ashamed." "My father was a fool," Julian said, his voice dripping with contempt. "He was blinded by sentiment, a mistake I don't intend to repeat. It was a performance, a cold, calculated mask designed to hide the truth. But I saw the flicker of pain in his eyes. The endgame unfolded not with a barrage of bullets, but with a quiet, lethal game of chess. Offers and counteroffers, threats and bluffs. Marcus wanted the Ariadne file. Julian wanted justice. But I saw the truth. This was never about the file or the empire. This was about two brothers, two sons, trapped in a cycle of jealousy and revenge. The moment came when Marcus, realizing he was cornered, gave Nico a silent nod. Nico drew his weapon, his hands shaking, his eyes filled with tears as he pointed it at Julian. My heart stopped. This was it, the ultimate betrayal. But then, in a move that no one anticipated, Nico turned the gun and fired, not at Julian, but at Marcus. The shot echoed like a thunderclap in the silent room. Marcus crumpled to the ground, a look of shocked disbelief on his face. Nico then raised the gun to his own head. "No!" Julian yelled, but it was too late. The second shot was the final, tragic punctuation mark on a decades-long war. Silence descended, thick and heavy, broken only by my ragged breaths. It was over. The ghosts had been laid to rest. In the aftermath, the world settled into a new, fragile kind of quiet. Julian, true to his word, dismantled the most brutal aspects of his empire. He used the secrets in the Ariadne file not to conquer, but to stabilize, creating a new balance of power built on information and mutual deterrence rather than fear. He was still a king, but he was a different kind of king. He found Nico's son, secured the best medical care in the world, and set up a trust that would ensure his future. It was an act of penance, an absolution for a man who had been a victim of his own loyalty. And me? I found my place, not in the shadows, but at his side. I was no longer just an archivist. I was the keeper of secrets, the guardian of the legacy, the architect of a new, more ethical kind of power. I was his partner, his queen. One evening, months later, we stood on the penthouse balcony, the city lights glittering below us. The storm had passed, leaving behind a sky scrubbed clean, filled with stars. "Do you ever miss it?" I asked, leaning against him. "The silence? The anonymity?" He turned, pulling me into his arms, his emerald eyes soft in the moonlight. "I have a new kind of silence now," he murmured, his lips brushing against my hair. "It's not empty. It's peaceful. It's you." He kissed me, a slow, deep kiss filled with the promise of a future we had built from the ashes of the past. My father left me an empire built on shadows. Your father left you a key to bring it all into the light. He pulled back, a ghost of a smile on his lips. I think they would have approved. The danger wasn't gone. It never would be. The world we lived in was built on a foundation of secrets and power, and there would always be new ghosts, new threats lurking in the darkness. But for the first time, I wasn't afraid, because I wasn't alone. I had found my place in the quiet stillness, not before the storm, but in the calm, steady heart of it. And it felt finally like home.